We have a governor who likes to say California is a model for the nation. And we have a president who seems to be taking him at his word. President Biden has nominated Gavin Newsom's former labor secretary, Julie Su, to be the next United States Secretary of Labor. With this nomination, President Biden has made his most consequential move yet towards bringing the policies, politics, and personnel of Sacramento to Washington, D.C., towards making California's problems the nation's problems. So as we stand here today in front of our state capitol, we need to ask what kind of model the Julie Su Labor Department and Gavin Newsom governorship would provide. Simply put, it is a failed model. In her tenure as our state's labor secretary, Julie Su failed the people of California. First, under her supervision, our state's unemployment office, known as the EDD, failed to deliver unemployment checks to millions of Californians who lost their jobs because of the COVID shutdowns. Number two, because of her gross negligence, the EDD made upwards of $30 billion in fraudulent payments to fraudsters and criminals, the largest fraud of taxpayer dollars in history. And third, as an architect and enforcer of the corrupt labor law known as AB 5, Julie Su cost thousands of California freelancers their livelihoods. As elected representatives and community leaders in this nominee's home state, we have a responsibility to vet this nomination. And we are here today to say that Deputy Secretary Su is manifestly unqualified to be the next Secretary of Labor for the United States. We have today a number of elected representatives and community leaders who can testify to the consequences of her failed leadership directly. I have already written a coalition letter to President Biden, signed by members of the California congressional delegation, urging him to nominate anyone other than Su. And I am joined today by Assembly Republican leader James Gallagher, who is making the same request of the president. Leader Gallagher's voice is one that it is vitally important for anyone considering this nomination to listen to. Because if we want to know how Julie Su would run the U.S. Department of Labor, the best indication is how she led the California Department of Labor. And the members of Leader Gallagher's caucus had to deal directly with the consequences of her failed leadership in that position. So here to tell the story of what Deputy Secretary Su's failures meant for Californians and what they would mean for all Americans, it is my honor to introduce the exceptional leader of the California State Assembly Republicans, James Gallagher.
All right, well, good morning. It's always a pleasure to be with my partner in liberty, Kevin Kiley. As you know, Kevin and I are always down for a righteous cause and not afraid to stand up for what's right and stand up for the people of California, who were the ultimate victims of Julie Su's failed leadership in this state. And so I'm here this morning with some of my caucus members as well. We've written a letter as well to the president and to the Senate. And we're here with a very simple message for President Biden and the senators considering Julie Su's nomination. Stop rewarding failure. Under Julie Su's leadership, California lost more than $30 billion. $30 billion in unemployment insurance fraud. Millions of Californians were calling our offices because they had their claims wrongfully denied. Last year in Washington, Congress had to pass a law to avert a devastating rail strike. Clearly, Julie Su is not cut out for the nation's top labor job. But even more concerning than her incompetence is her judgment. Su was a lead promoter of AB 5, putting the bill's special interest backers above the workers that she should have been looking out for. You'll hear from a number of people today who were hurt by that exact choice. Their careers have been ended. Their freedom to work when they wanted, where they wanted, was destroyed. And their financial well-being was jeopardized. That's not pro-worker. 90% of freelancers were happy with the way things were in California before AB 5, but that didn't matter to Julie Sue. Consumers and businesses worked with freelancers to shop, to travel, and more. But that did not matter to Julie Sue. What mattered were the special interests that saw massive payday in ending the career of freelancers. And that's who Julie Sue stood with. Thankfully, the voters of California overwhelmingly rejected Julie Sue's vision of ending freelance work. But despite that rejection, Sue and Joe Biden want to impose those very same rules now on the nation. This is something that we truly cannot afford. Julie Sue's record of failure is something we can't afford. And that's why we are telling Joe Biden and the Senate loud and clear, stop rewarding failure. Do not give Julie Sue a promotion. Thank you, and I would like to now bring up the president of CABIA, Tom Manzo.
Good morning, everybody. My name's Tom Manzo. I'm founder of the California Business and Industrial Alliance. We represent small to medium-sized businesses up and down the state of California. We focus on labor law reform. And California has some of the strictest labor laws in the United States. Their labor law digest is over 1,100 pages. They have a law that's called the Private Attorney General Act, where any private citizen can step in the shoes of the labor commissioner and enforce labor laws. Who's allowed this to happen? Julie Sue. Julie Sue started out the whole wage theft. Any employer that did something wrong, we're accusing them of being a wage thief. So what ends up happening is the 1,100-page labor law digest, they have one technical issue. Maybe the pay stub's wrong. Maybe they took a late lunch. All of a sudden they're called wage thieves, and she decides to announce it on her DIR website. As she continues to destroy businesses that way, then she rolls along and does AB 5, a supporter of AB 5. Countless number of people have lost their jobs and lost their opportunities to earn a living. Jobs have now left the state. People don't want to hire independent contractors in California. They want nothing to do with it. And the next thing she does, over $33 billion lost to the EDD. When we opposed Julie Sue, we were the only trade organization in California opposing Julie Sue to be nominated Deputy Secretary of Labor. It was only $11 billion at that time. 2 years later, it's $33 billion. How much is it going to be after another year or two when they dig into it? On top of that now, she's supporting AB 257, which is the commission that's going to keep an eye on fast food restaurants. California can't continue to do this. They are over-regulating small, medium-sized, large businesses who cannot survive in this climate. And the last thing we need to do is export her policies to the United States. We need to make a stand. We need to say no. We need to say she should not be the labor commissioner. Thank you very much, everybody.
Okay, and next we have the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce President, Tom Indriri.
Thank you, Congressman Kiley and Assemblyman Gallagher, for bringing this very important issue before us today. I remember standing here just 3 years ago, right over here, with the repeal AB 5 rally. And so here we are again, shining a light on opposing the nomination of Julie Su for U.S. Secretary of Labor. As CEO of the Lincoln Area Chamber of Commerce, I've witnessed the devastating effects of AB 5 and the inexcusable debacle of the EDD firsthand in my role at the Chamber of Commerce. As I was thinking about what to say today, I remembered how Julie Su's mismanagement of the EDD affected my own family. My son was laid off in the very beginning of the pandemic. So I told him, you better get in there and get online and start filing for your unemployment benefits. Well, he did, and he was denied. Several weeks later, he finds out that they asked him, did you look for a job immediately? He said, yes, the very next day when I was terminated. They said, well, that wasn't good enough. You should have looked that day, and he was denied. Several months went by of him struggling and struggling. He finally finds a new job, and 2 days later, the second shutdown happens, and he lost that job.
And then you just drag.
But this time was a little different. He was granted his unemployment benefits, no questions asked. So he was able to see both sides of the coin there. He was shut out, and then the second round, like the other $32 billion in payments, he was just welcomed right in.
Yeah. No.
When I say I am not tech savvy,
I say all this only because only in big government can a person preside over the largest unemployment insurance fraud in U.S. history, oversee the wrongful denial of over 1 million unemployment claims, and support the disastrous AB 5, threatening the livelihoods of over 2 million freelance workers, to only get rewarded by being nominated for the Secretary of Labor, U.S. Secretary of Labor. Please join us in opposing this. Thank you.
Ask what that login is, then you can log into it right here.
Okay, and next we have a guest with us, a freelancer who had to deal very firsthand with the effects of AB 5, Aaron Gaden.
Hello, my name is Aaron Gaden, and I'm a musician. I'm both a band leader and a member of other bands. I'd like to tell you a little story about the wonders of AB 5. A colleague of mine made a point to get compliant with AB 5, and upon starting to gig in 2020, they paid all their workers' comp and all the things that they needed to do in order to be compliant with AB 5. And as a result of their compliance, he made, as the band leader, negative $2 on the gig.
Okay, so yeah, we'll do that.
That is not helping the little guy. That's what Julie Su has done in California. That's what AB 5 has done. The PRO Act will do. The workers' flexibility and small business protection racket, as I have tried to refrain from calling it, that kind of died in the Senate. And so to have the person who is both responsible for billions of dollars
So now you got
fraud,
it, and then you can
for
email it.
for driving thousands of jobs, thousands of people out of the state, where do you go if that goes up to the national level? There's already a proposed rule within the Department of Labor that is even worse than AB 5, that checks off all the boxes that were possible aids for relief, for legal relief to not be destroyed by AB 5, and that's already in the works, being proposed by the Department of Labor. So as the Deputy Secretary of Labor, she's already done enough. What more will she do if made the Secretary of Labor? California can't stand AB 5, and the nation cannot stand to have Julie Su as the Director or the Secretary of Labor. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much, Aaron. And we do have several of my colleagues from the legislature are here today. We have Assembly Member Josh Hoover, Assembly Member Bill Asaley, Assembly Member Joe Patterson, Assembly Member Jim Patterson have all joined us this morning. So it's great. Our colleagues, I said, we have united in this mission to stop Julie Sue's nomination to the Secretary of Labor. And Assembly Member Asaley is going to say a few words.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here. In the last 2 years of the Biden administration, if there's anything we've learned, it's the importance of having competent leaders in government. Take Pete Buttigieg, for example. He may be a talented politician, but he's an awful transportation department secretary. We're now seeing the results of incompetence at the top. Near misses at the airport, the first shutdown of U.S. airspace since 9/11, and a series of train derailments poisoning our communities and shaking rail passengers' confidence in our system. Here in California, we've got firsthand experience with incompetence. We have experience with Julie Sue. As our state labor secretary, she saw the largest unemployment insurance fraud in U.S. history. Our state auditor reported that EDD had been aware of problems with our unemployment system for decades, and she did nothing about it. So when COVID hit, Julie Sue's department allowed thieves, scammers, and prisoners to take off with more than $32 billion in taxpayer money. Let's put that in context. We're facing a deficit this year of almost $30 billion. So the entire deficit of the budget, Julie Sue just handed out to criminals over the last couple years. Then, rather than stopping the fraud, her department began delaying and wrongfully denying millions of legitimate claims to struggling Californians. Julie Sue was asleep at the wheel, and struggling Californians paid the price. The U.S. Department of Labor is too important to be led by someone with Julie Sue's record of failure. They deserve a Secretary of Labor. They can be confident in their work performance. They deserve a secretary who will work for the people, and they deserve someone more qualified than Julie Sue. I'm frankly shocked that she's even being considered. I'm shocked she's still employed. She should be fired, not promoted. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Assembly Member. And so we will sum up today, and I'll leave the closing remarks to our Congressman and friend, Kevin Kiley.
Thank you, Leader Gallagher. It's good to be back. Still a lot of construction going on here, I can see. Can't wait to see how it all looks in 20 years when it's finished. I was just thinking, it was a few years ago. Aaron, I think you were here. James, you were here. I guess you guys weren't here yet. Jim, I think you were here. When AB 5 passed, and at this very spot, we had freelancers from across California who had just lost everything because of this law, who came here to rally for its repeal. And then it wasn't long after that that we had lockdowns that put people out of work all across the state, and then people who could potentially have worked inside of their homes during lockdowns as proofreaders, as writers, as editors, as medical interpreters, couldn't do so because of this AB 5 law. So then they tried to get an unemployment check, but it did not arrive sometimes for weeks or months or indefinitely because of the incompetence of the EDD. And then to add insult to injury, checks were flying out the door to hardened criminals who are easily able to fool the department. Now, the common thread in all of these failures, aside from the governor, of course, was Julie Sue. So why in the world, of all people, of all the highly qualified people in our country and in our state, would President Biden choose to elevate this person for Secretary of Labor? Well, I think it reflects two of the problems of this capital that we do not want to see increasingly becoming the problems of our nation's capital. And that is making decisions in a blindly partisan manner. This is someone who could not get a single Republican vote in her confirmation for Deputy Secretary. I would urge the President to find someone who can get the support of Democrats and Republicans alike. And secondly, it reflects a desire to govern in a way that serves special interests. As soon as the sitting Secretary of Labor announced he was leaving, you had the very coalition of special interests behind AB 5 who came out and started pushing for Julie Su's nomination. So we, again, are urging the president to withdraw this nomination. We are urging the Senate to reject this nomination. And at a time of such tremendous importance and uncertainty for the American workforce, we need a Secretary of Labor who will be on the side of workers. Thank you very much, and happy to answer any questions. Right. That's a great question. Well, I'm trying to shed light on what happened here in California, and I'm grateful that we have some of our outstanding members of the Assembly and business leaders, freelancers, who have joined us to do the same thing. And so you're right, it was a very close vote for the second highest level position of that department, strict partisan vote, and now she's going for the top job. There's going to be a lot more scrutiny. And I think that when more people are learning about what happened here, you're going to see a number of the members of the Democratic caucus in the Senate who have their doubts about this nomination. We've seen a number, actually, of the president's nominations fail recently. And I think that's going to happen here. And it's important to remember, I gave a speech on the floor of the House where I sort of laid out the comprehensive case about what happened here, is the Democrats in this Capitol were extremely critical of the EDD throughout the last few years. You know, you had Assembly Member David Chu, who had his hashtag EDD fail of the day. You had Assembly Member Petrie Norris, who is the chair of the committee that oversees the EDD, the Labor Department, who said that Sue did not do a good job with the EDD, who said it was outrageous that she didn't take the simple steps to prevent fraud that other states did. So I think that when you look at the level of bipartisan criticism that was a constant during her tenure here, that's going to translate into bipartisan opposition in Washington. Well, I didn't say I would support anyone other than her, but I would say that just about anyone other than her would be a better pick. I'll leave it to the president to make his choice. So we're not here to name any particular names. I mean, sure, I could give you a list of a lot of people that I'd like, but what I'd say is just the principles that the president should make his decision according to are someone who will get bipartisan support and someone who will be on the side of workers and someone who will unleash the potential of our economy rather than try to suppress it. Well, yes, she's. Whoa. At least the rain held off. So, number one, she was a vocal supporter of it. She's been called an architect of the law. But what's even worse is that she was in charge of its enforcement, and she ruthlessly enforced it. She made statements saying we need to go around and audit people in order to, hit them with fines and penalties. She actually continued doing this, auditing, harassing small businesses during the COVID shutdowns, when small businesses were struggling to survive. And then, perhaps worst of all, when Congress decided it was going to provide unemployment benefit to freelancers through the CARES Act, she actually wrongfully withheld their benefits in an attempt to shoehorn them into the regular unemployment system, which she could then, use as a way to go after them and do even more audits. And you don't need to take my word for this. Have you heard of Adam Schiff, United States Congressman? Not someone who's on our side of the aisle. He said at the time, he wrote a letter to Julie Su herself saying she needed to give freelancers those benefits. They were struggling to put them on the table. So just another example of how it has been bipartisan criticism that has marked her tenure in California.